Hello, and welcome to my Principles of Ethnomusicology final project. My name is Patrie, and my project is called Play It by Ear, exploring the relationship between musicians and performers in an improvised musical comedy setting. I wanted to start out with going over the inspirations for my project. The two big ones are Dropout and Smosh. Dropout, previously known as College Humor, produces many comedy shows, one of them being Play It by Ear, the show where I got the title of my project. It is a musical improvisation show where each episode, a cast and band, improvised a full 30-minute long musical. And Smosh, one of the first successful comedy channels on YouTube, creates many improv sketch shows, including Try Not to Laugh, a show where one person from the cast sits on a stool and tries not to laugh at the sketches their castmates make around them. Out of the series so far, they have made 2 musical improv episodes, of which I will be referencing later on in this presentation. After my introduction, I will be introducing and talking about my 2 interviewees, Josh Flurry and Space Bear. I will then be getting into the meat of my presentation, where I discuss the relationship between musician and performer, touching on topics such as unspoken and spoken communication, familiarity with friends and styles, and interpretation of improv comedy. Now to introduce my interviewees. My first interview was with Josh Flurry. Josh is a sketch and comedy writer/producer who is currently very active at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in Hollywood, where he writes sketches on the sketch team Moon Goon. From 2022 to 2024, he worked with Smosh as their main channel's sketch/scripted editor and occasional songwriter. In his extra free time, he's a musician playing guitar in the local bands Jacob the Horse and Cheer Up Emo Kids, and occasionally in the pit bands for local musicals, most notably productions by Team Starkid. And my other interviewees, comedy duo Space Bear, Dana Gray Allen and Nathan Patrick Fillers, based out of Massachusetts, most famous for their remixes of the YouTubers Game Grumps, which is a gaming comedy duo. Space Bear creates these songs through a combination of relying on DAWs and using real instruments. They have most recently released a comedy album titled Fever Dream Radio, insert clip here. Where the concept revolves around scanning through a radio and hearing different channels mixed together. Now we will get into the relationship between musician and performer. I'm going to start off with defining what is a musician and what is a performer in this context, because it can vary from place to place and what kind of genres you're in. So in this case, a performer is most likely an actor or a singer or a combination of the two. Someone taking the spotlight on the stage, having the intention of the crowd on them. The performer is the one setting the scene, creating the plot for the sketch, play, or any type of improvised theater. A musician is someone using an instrument to create accompaniment for the performer as a support. They are usually not adding anything to the scene other than the music. Now, the lines here can get blurred when the music becomes a part of a scene, which I have an example of that taken from the book chapter Understanding Improv Comedy Language, written by Joseph Monteleone from the book titled Forging Pathways to Improvised Music. The quote goes as follows. As an actor began to create the scene, I accidentally hit 2 notes on the keyboard. The actor reacted physically to my notes. This time, I was the other actor in the scene. Without saying anything, the improv actor and I created a scene in which he played a man who got frustrated with trying to fix his doorbell. Now, it should be obvious that the musician wasn't literally the other actor, that's why it was in air quotes, but the music the actor was playing became an object for the actor to bounce off of and perform with. So that's an example of how sometimes the musician can kind of become part of the performance and not just in a supporting role. Now that we have the definitions of musician and performer defined, we can further dive into the paths of communication that musician and performer use in tandem to help create a scene flow successfully. So this kind of communication can come from a couple different ways. First, we're going to start off with unspoken communication. A lot of it can be on the performer to use cues such as body language, hand movements, moving your body into space, melodic changes, going up in a pitch, going down a pitch, getting louder, getting softer. And also if you're in a duet or a group situation, if the group starts harmonizing, that might lead to a change in a scene or in a section of a song, any of that sort. Here is a clip from one of Smosh's Try Not to Laugh videos where this can be seen.
But I think it'd be fun to cry once in a while, because life's getting so hard when you only travel in a clown car. It's a joke, life's a joke. It's always a joke with these folks. It's a joke, it's a joke.
You may have also realized in that clip that the musician has to pay a lot of attention to what the performers are doing in order to catch these changes that are happening and successfully execute them along with the performer. This isn't by coincidence, this is by design. It is very important to the flow of an improvised song, and I have a clip of Josh Flurry, who you also saw or heard in the last clip, explaining more of what that process means.
Just following the structure, like, okay, they're definitely setting up like a verse, and I think they're going to make a chorus now. So like waiting for like them to kind of give that signal either with a change of how they're saying the next line, if they're saying it in a different note or like volume, or they're starting to harmonize with each other. I'm like, okay, this is definitely like a next section.
Yeah. Something else about Smosh is that a lot of the cast and the crew are close friends. They know a lot about each other. And the familiarity of who your performers are and of what styles they like to perform helps a lot with developing these musical scenes and songs. I like to think about popular song form as one of the most influential pieces of improv musical comedy, just because it is seen so frequently, and it is most of the music that people listen to nowadays in, Broadway, jazz, any kind of musical theater. You're going to see pop song form pop out over and over and over again. So common now that most people just know it by heart, whether or not they realize it. And verses and choruses now kind of have ways that they're expected to develop and change. This shared familiarity makes it easier for the musician to take cues from the performer, and vice versa. This can be tied to similar properties talked about in the introduction of the game's Black Girls play, written by Kira D. Gaunt. Quote, "The game's Black Girls play are lessons in Black musical style where performances function as scripts for behavior, and is a basis of ethnography that reveals a circular relationship and adoption between the rhyming, dance-like gestures, melodies, and rhythms practiced in girls' musical games." So obviously what Gaunt is talking about is very correlated to Black girls' games and how they connect with each other. And this is very similar to the way that other musicians and performers find themselves connecting to each other on stage in front of an audience, improvising. They have a very common, similar vernacular that they can just kind of riff off of and go for. And it helps. It makes it much easier to perform. Also, just knowing the performer's personal tastes allows for more seamless communication. It helps to know what styles they like and the music they like to listen to, because that almost always influences their performance. It can also help the musician know what the boundaries are, and I have a clip from Josh's interview talking more about that.
I was pretty well versed in what a lot of those actors like to sing, like what their range is. Especially Chance and Angela. Okay, whenever Chance comes on stage, I know what keys to stay in. But there would also be times where I would start playing something, and then Angela or Amanda would be like, actually, no, make it sad.
And now pivoting a little bit away from the direct correlation between improvisation on stage, we can also talk about the interpretation of improv that has already happened. Talking a little bit more about Game Grumps, their kind of improvisation is more media-based. The way that their channel works is that they are playing a game, and then usually once music comes up in the game, or it's kind of a mellow game like chess or something, they'll really hook on to the music of the game and start just riffing lines and melodies and such. And my second interviewee's Space Bear like to take those clips and make a full song out of them. They end up being really cool. There's a lot that goes along with this. You have to figure out the structure of the song. Improvisation can be inconsistent and by nature will never be the same thing twice. And so sometimes you have to find like what section should go where and how that should be designed. And I have a clip of Space Bear talking about that.
Sometimes like it'll just be perfect as it is and I can just really just put something behind what they already did. Other times I really have to hunt and peck for some sort of coherent like storyline or, you know, musical phrasing that like makes sense but still like seems cohesive. And sometimes that's really hard. Like for example, they're playing this like YouTube game where they're putting poop on ice cream and serving it to people.
I remember that. Yeah.
And they're singing the whole time. And it's like a lot of stuff they do is like good and catchy by itself. But when you put it together, a lot of the stuff doesn't really connect well. So that took me a long time to like just go through the vocals and try and find something that made sense.
It's also equally as important to find the through line of the song. Most improvised content tells a story. They have an arc of some sort. But the way that Game Grumps do it, it might not always happen in such a clear arc. So Space Bear has the challenge of sometimes digging through all of the material and trying to make, sometimes inspire, a plot line that makes most sense. And I'm going to show a clip of what that could look like from Game Grumps.
Choose a dessert for your daddy.
Choose the only dessert. Would you like watermelon, bananas, or shit?
I'm gonna put shit in the cream, ice cream. Put
Good
a little
job.
milk on it.
Drag me to move the syrup, put it on the shit.
This is such a great beat.
Highlights Space Bear's quote from before. It's also important to highlight the funny bits and add in commentary whenever possible. I have a very clear example from our interview, which I will also show, and the song, just the very small bit where that happens.
My brain is always wired to see like where can I find like joke moments in the song, like where they stop or like they like the redacted jokes, like we probably shouldn't tell it.
And all the money that's in my Swiss bank account that he doesn't know about until I blew it for myself just now. The bank account is offshore and it has all the money in it. I don't have to pay taxes because it's not in the nation. I'll be getting a phone call from the IRS. Maybe we should edit this part out so they don't know about one of the conditions.
I think it's very interesting how collaboration can happen almost one-sided in a way in this kind of situation where Game Grumps and Space Bear are not inherently affiliated. Game Grumps isn't asking them to do this, but they put out this content and Space Bear looks at it and goes, I can use something from this. I can make something really cool out of this. And then they do that. And it's just turning one form of improv into another form of musical comedy, and it kind of just mixes it all together. I think it's cool. And so, in conclusion, musicians and performers have always existed in a setting where they have to communicate with each other effectively. Unspoken communication with body language and musical cues, spoken communication, knowing your friends and knowing what they like to perform and knowing styles of music like pop music, and interpretation, putting together a story from improv during improv or after the fact. It's been really fun to get to analyze this kind of media that I'm already watching and enjoying, and I think it adds another layer to how we can view the content that's being produced today, and it holds a lot of value, not just because it makes you laugh, because it does, but because it's really smart, and there's something going on underneath all of the giggles and the rhythms and the music, and yeah. So that's it. I thank you for watching, and I hope this was interesting. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you later.